Battle of Arthuret took place in 572, is it?
Yeah.
73? 573?
When Merlin went mad.
573, yeah.
573, yeah.
Merlin
So
went mad with the amount of people that died.
yes.
80,000.
We're talking a mind-boggling amount of people here. 80,000 people.
Christians and pagans.
Yes, Roderick of the British against...
The Christian Roderick.
Christian Roderick
Newly
against the pagan Scottish king.
Yeah, Strathclyde.
Who was named...
Gwendolew.
Gwendolen.
Was that
Yes.
Merlin's sister, Gwendolyn?
Yes.
No, he was
No.
he was a king. He was
King.
the king of Strathclyde and the pagan Britons at the time. So there was this big clash between those.
The Welsh-speaking Scots.
Yes,
the
exactly.
British
Yes,
kingdom of
yes,
Strathclyde.
exactly.
The same family as Gildas.
Yes,
Yeah.
same. Yes, so they were.
Core.
The still Brythonic-speaking group in this part of Scotland.
And the Merlin you'll talking about was the Merlin whose base was at Partick. He was a Jag supporter, Partick Thistle.
Yeah.
It's a hill there, it's all identified. And he was not the Merlin of King Arthur in the 530s.
Yeah, there's two Merlin.
Well, every king had his Merlin.
Yes.
It's a title.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing to establish the title, not a personal name. And Count Nikolai Tolstoy wrote the book The Quest for Merlin.
Yeah.
And that goes into identify him pretty well.
So people say, why did this place, why was it called Arthuret? And it's supposed to mean Ed as
Or
the head. Arthurid, yeah. Some people say it's the head of Arthur, but it's probably where Arthur actually viewed the armies, because just on this ridge over here where the Holy Ware is, you can look down on a huge plain.
That's
of
the
Solway.
River Esk.
Yeah. And that plain is where you could get 80,000 people, not up here on this roof. And so it said that the leaders would have viewed, or Arthur may have viewed, the armies battling down there, or the leaders of the battle, that's for sure. But then there's two big mounds behind us. One of them still covered by those trees. But inside those trees there's a very large sort of ridge. And some say some of the dead were buried in that mound. The church itself is a very early church. And some say from the earliest Christian times, but several terrible rebuildings have destroyed a lot of the archaeology.
I was just going to say, of course, this ridge is the sacred part of this whole area. You know, it's said to have been a druid sanctuary, a beacon site, a place of ceremony. So it's actually that ridge where the trees are is the sacred place, and that's where the male current comes as he comes from Carlisle. That's what he's focused on, and of course the tower of the church draws him too. And then we're going to take you to a holy well just behind, where he also goes before he heads to Scotland. Wow.
But some people say that Arthur himself was buried here. This is not, this is just some people's opinion, but there was a plaque in the church that said that King Arthur, according to tradition, was buried here. And there's two sort of 5th century, 6th century mounds, burial mounds in the graveyard here. You can see by the wall.
You can hardly see them.
You can just see one there. There are grassy mounds. Yeah, they're early graves from the time, possibly from that time. So some people point, well, perhaps Arthur was buried in one of those mounds.
But the word, of course, the Scottish Arthurs, Arthur of
Yes, exactly. It just means the leader, the bearer.
The Clan MacArthur,
The title, yeah, exactly. Arthur is the title, just as Merlin is. The curious things, unfortunately we can't go in the church, but if you ever come back and the church is open, say if it's on a Sunday, there's a very unusual, they call it the heart brass, and it's a piece of one of a grave brass, and then in the middle is a heart with two hands, and it's supposed to represent the soul. It came from a knight crusader's probably tomb, so they say. Also, on the outside of the tower, where the Belinus current goes through, somebody's carved a grail just sticking out of the tower, which I thought was really odd, and there's a picture of it in the book. You'll see that as we pass it.
Where the male current enters the tower. The borders of Scotland was once the realm of the Brythonic-speaking Britons, and perhaps that is why, as we cross from England, we sense that we are entered a familiar and enchanted land. The Britons of Strathclyde in the border regions, and the Godolphin tribe from Lothian in the west, were two Welsh-speaking and Celtic groups that held territory sandwiched between the Antonine Wall and Hadrian's Wall. They were also kinsmen of the Picts, descended from the same Brythonic-speaking Iron Age tribes. Roman historians were the first to produce a written history of Scotland, which they called Caledonia, describing it as wild, waterless mountains and desolate swampy plains, and possess neither walls, cities, nor tilled field, but live on their flocks, wild game, and certain fruits. Tacitus wrote that its people were aggressive, awkward, and difficult to subdue, many of them with red hair and large limbs, reminding him of the barbarians they fought against on the Rhine. By the beginning of the 10th century, the descendants of Kenneth MacAlpin, the king of the Picts and Scots, changed the name of these northern lands to Alba or Alban, meaning high country. Alba derives from the pre-Indo-European word Alb, meaning hill, and the Italo-Celtic Alps, or Alpen, meaning mountainous regions, the P and B being interchangeable in the languages of the Britons and Celts. Kenneth MacAlpin was the son of a Dairiada king and a Pictish princess from the royal house of Fortren, who created the first single kingdom of the Scots, having proved himself against the Vikings. Considered by many as the founding father of Scotland, he compares to Alfred the Great of England. MacAlpin would later move the Celtic church from Iona to Scone, bringing St. Columba's remains to the Pictish church at Dunkeld in 849 CE. By the 11th century, MacAlpin's descendants were known as the Kings of Alba, and ruled over all of Scotland. They spawned the longest living royal family in Britain, which includes Malcolm III of the House of Canmore, whose daughter Matilda married Henry I of England, and the houses of Bruce and Stuart. The Pictish elite had long ago converted to Christianity, and traditions placed both St. Palladius and St. Ninian in Pictland before the Roman Catholic missionaries ever came to these shores. St. Columba in the 6th century would further the Christian message amongst the old Britons and the Picts. Perhaps it's of no surprise that in this borderland realm of the old Welsh-speaking Britons are stories of King Arthur and Merlin. Moffat in Arthur and the Lost Kingdom, 1999, mentions French chronicler Lambert de Saint-Omer, who in 1120 refers to a palace of Arthur the soldier in Britain, in the land of the Picts, built with various and wondrous art, in which the deeds of all his acts and wars are seen to be sculpted. We can only guess where this palace may have stood, having been lost to myth and legend long ago. From Arthuret, the male Belinus current takes us to the old market town of Langholm that marks the alignment. Other than its proximity to the Belinus alignment, Langholm has something in common with Birmingham and Manchester, as during medieval times it was a manufacturing town, particularly renowned for the making of tweed. The male current was located passing through the old market cross behind the town hall, known as the Mercat Cross. However, it's actually a sandstone pillar holding aloft a flattened spherical stone with a carved equal-armed cross on its upper surface. It once stood by the old crossroads in the middle of the town on a square stone plinth, later used as a platform for important proclamations. This is a perfect representation of an omphalos stone, formerly marking the geomantic centre of the town. For the early tribes, the pillar represented a world axis, a link between heaven and earth. These pillars were the forerunners of the Christian cross, erected in towns and villages across Europe, taking the form of a pillar topped by a stone ball representing the sun and a square base fixing it to earth. Belinus continues through the town hall before crossing the road to the scant remains of a castle. Its strategic location on a flat plain next to the confluence of 3 river valleys was an ideal position to guard a very important fording place that linked the north of England with Scotland. The many ghost sightings in the town are probably due to the Great Fault and the powerful convergence of 3 rivers. This potent force of ki and the telluric elegies allow all manner of supernatural phenomena. As we penetrate further north, we arrive at the wild and rugged Etric Forest, once part of the ancient Caledonian Forest. Today this area is largely open moorland, the forest now severely depleted due to the advent of sheep farming and industrialised forestry. Etric Forest was also the hunting ground of the medieval Kings of Scotland, but according to Moffat its earlier name was Celidon Woods. This ancient realm was Merlin's place of exile after the battle at Arthuret, once a stronghold of the ancient tribe of the Selgovae. Moffat believes King Arthur fought his 7th battle here, defending the later tribe of the Godothin against their old enemy, the southern Picts. Meanwhile, the female Elen current is meandering north, just to the west of the male current and alignment. After visiting the old smithy at Gretna Green, where marriages were sealed with the striking of a hammer on the anvil, she heads for the magical landscape of Eskdale. Next to the White Esk River, she visits 2 megalithic stone circles. One of these is the Girdle Stains. The other is the Lupin Stains. The Lupin Stains has 2 great entrance stones and consists of 12 megaliths. Just a little north of here, she is attracted by the delightful garden and lake at the Kagyu Samye Ling Tibetan Monastery. This eastern temple, streaming with multicoloured flags, seems out of place in this wild landscape. Crossing moor, rugged moorland and bog, Ellen looks down upon the fast-flowing Tweed River before descending to the village of Drumelsia. Once the territory of the Welsh tribe called the Cadini and the Godothin, this remote region has place names more akin to the Welsh Cymric language. Local legends here recall the tale of Merlin, the last of the royal druidic bards, who fled into these parts after the Battle of Arthuret. The female current was found flowing along the axis of Drumelsia Kirk, supposedly founded by St. Cuthbert's or one of his disciples. Its origins are a mystery, but parts of the present buildings seem centuries older than its post-Reformation structure. According to the church guide, Drumelsia is a Cymric name, meaning the Dun of Merlin, or Merlin's fort. Dyke Rich and Ian Begg in On the Trail of Merlin suggest Dunmella as one of its earlier names, meaning Hill of Merlin. Of interest is a house in the village, aptly named Merlindale Lodge. Just below the kirk by the river, marked on the map as Burnfoot Pool, is the spot where the famous poet Sir Walter Scott in 1807 recalled the 12th century rhyme by Thomas the Rhymer. When Tweed and Porcel meet at Merlin's grave, Scotland and England shall one monarch have. Moffat, 1999. The prophecy seems to have come true, for on the 25th of July 1603, the day James VI of Scotland was crowned James I of England, a terrible flood changed the course of the Palesale burn, causing it to join the Tweed at the supposed spot of Merlin's grave. The river Palesale or Porcel is the old name for Drumelsia Burn, and where it now meets the Tweed there is said to be an old thorn tree the locals point out as Merlin's grave. According to legend, as Merlin lay entranced under the thorn tree, the spiders gathered from all sides and bound him in their threads, making him only visible to the fairy realm. The tree became famous as Merlin's thorn, an oracle place where his spirit could be invoked to receive his wisdom and prophecies. Jocelyn, a 13th century monk who wrote the life of St. Kentigern, likens Merlin to the Scottish prophet Lailoken, and records his place of passing near the River Tweed. After killing many men in battle, a voice from heaven condemned Lailoken to wander the woods until his death. He also prophesied his demise, stating where it would occur, and how his threefold death would befall him. The very same day he was caught and stoned by local shepherds, before being impaled upside down on stakes, left by fishermen, having fallen over a ridge into a river, and eventually drowned when the tide unexpectedly rose. Further north along the banks of the Tweed there is a standing stone on the edge of fields. The 6-foot-tall megalith stands near the original mating place of the rivers Powsale and Tweed before flooding changed its course. Was this standing stone the real grave of Lailoken or Merlin? However, a more suitable site for a grave would surely be the site of the church, set on a high plateau. Here the final resting place of such an important figure as a prophet of the Strathclyde Britons would be safe from flooding. At the side of the road, a little further along the valley near Alterstone Farm, Ellen passes through a large boulder with a flattened top half hidden in the undergrowth. A story associated with it describes the day when St. Kentigern was surprised in his solitude by an apparition of a wild and naked savage who commanded to speak to him. He said that his name was Lailoken, a bard also known as Merlin in the British court of King Vortigern, who had converted to Christianity after a great battle. Now a homeless wanderer living amongst the beasts of the field, he believed himself a grievous sinner seeking repentance after causing the terrible slaughter of so many men at the Battle of Arthuret. After hearing his confession, he received from St. Kentigern the Holy Sacrament and baptized the bard on the altar stone. Later that day, Merlin suffered his deadly fate. To the northwest of Drumelsia, we follow Ellen to a church at Stubbor, dedicated to St. Mungo, also known as St. Kentigern, which Dr. Gunn believes was founded over a hermit's cell, built during the time of this saint. It was here that Merlin was allegedly baptized, as depicted in the stained glass window in the north aisle. Ellen passes through this part of the church, reconstructed in 1928 from the body of the 15th century mortuary chapel, thought to be the original site of St. Mungo's or St. Kentigern's cell. Stubbor is derived from an Anglian word meaning a holy place, which according to Moffat suggests that the story of Merlin and St. Kentigern was very much alive during the Angles' occupation of this area in the 8th century. The reconstruction of St. Mungo's cell is identical to others found in Scotland, built by the mystical sect of the early Celtic Christians. Here Ellen also connects with a fragment of the original altar stone found at the side of the road near Alterstone Farm, visited earlier. Set into the exterior wall of the reconstructed cell is a megalithic standing stone, perhaps part of a pagan sanctuary that once existed here and preserved by the early Christians. Similar to 9 kirks in Cumbria, the early Celtic Christian Chaldee monks established their religious settlements on or near places where the feminine serpent power is at its most potent, further enhanced by their proximity to rivers. Stubbor next to the Tweed is no exception, where in the absence of a cave, the monks built beehive-like structures to directly commune with the earth and the serpent energy. The stone in Stubbor Kirk, pictured by Roger Griffith.